welcome to my kitchen. Today we are going to be learning how to feed your sourdough starter. So as you can see, I just poured some out. I'm going to be making 3 loaves of sourdough. So I poured 200 grams for each loaf that I'm working on. And so I've depleted my sourdough starter. So I figured what a perfect time to come on and we can learn to feed it together. So as you can see, well, it's kind of hard to tell, but my sourdough starter is up to this line right here. So it's important to know that whenever you're feeding sourdough, it's like a 1-to-1 correspondence for sourdough, starter, and flour. So I have to at least feed it this much. So that means that whenever I put the flour in, it'll go to here. Now, if I know that I'm gonna be baking a lot more bread, say I wanna make 3 more loaves tomorrow, I can put a lot more flour in there and then it will just make some more active sourdough starter. So let's go over the supplies that you're gonna need. The first thing you're gonna need is some flour, of course. I like to get the organic flour. The brand doesn't really matter to me, but I do like this one. And then you are also going to need a pitcher of water. So if you have like a water filter system, such as like a Berkey or an AquaTrue, then you can just take water directly from that and put it in your sourdough starter. However, if you do not have one of those, like we do not, because I can't make up my mind on which one I want, you can also just take tap water, put it into a pitcher, let it set out overnight, and then a lot of the chlorine that's in the tap water will evaporate. And so then you can use the water in your sourdough starter. The thing with using water that's got chlorine in it is that sometimes that chlorine can kill the yeast in your sourdough starter, which is not what you want. So I keep this one on the counter. And then since I've started making bread for farmers markets, I'm now keeping this one on the counter just because I'm going through a lot more sourdough starter. And so I find that I need more water. So if you're gonna be making big batches, you might need a big pitcher. The last thing that you're gonna need is a wooden spoon, just to stir everything together. So let's get started. Okay, now like I said, my sourdough starter is pretty depleted. It's all the way down to here. So I am going to take my flour and I'm gonna add a little bit more than just a 1-to-1 correspondence because I know that tomorrow I'm gonna be wanting to make some more bread. So you can see I filled it all the way up to here. So I did maybe double like the amount of sourdough starter that was in there. Okay, so next for water. This is another part that a lot of people want to measure out and do everything very scientifically. I am not like that. My brain does not work that way because it's overwhelming. So what I do is I take my water that's been setting and letting the chlorine evaporate, and I just pour some in. And I'll show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like when I pour it in before I stir or anything. Okay, so now that we've got some water in here, I like to take the end of the wooden spoon just because I feel like I can reach the crevices a little bit better. And so you're just gonna take your spoon and you're gonna stir it around. A lot of times I will put not enough water in first, just because I would rather add in more water than flour. But I mean, you can really save it. If you added too much flour and it's super clumpy, then just add a little bit more water until you get to that, they call it a warm peanut butter consistency. And then on the flip side, if it is like super runny like water, then just add more flour. It's really not too complicated. Okay, so I just scrape off the sides and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so this is what it's looking like right now. And it's a little thick for my liking, so I'm gonna add a little bit more water. Okay, now after adding in that little bit of extra water, it's now at the consistency that I like to keep it. You can see that I can stir easily. However, there are still some like clumps in it. That's kind of where you want to be. It's a happy medium of, you know, not being too watery, but also not being too clumpy. And that's really it, guys. So we just fed our sourdough starter together. It is now ready to just sit on the countertop. And then in like 4 or so hours, there will be lots of bubbles and the starter will have grown a little bit just because it's getting all of those bubbles in there. So whenever you store your sourdough starter, I like to just get my lid and just barely put it on. So I don't screw it down tight or anything because I want some airflow for the starter. I also have this jar. This one's super dirty. But I have this jar that's got a lid on it. This came with like a rubber like suction thing to put on the top of the lid, but I took that off. That way it can just sit on here and have some airflow through it. So I hope this video was helpful. It really is simple, and I want to make sure that I'm helping y'all in any way I can. Thank you so much to those who purchased some sourdough starter from me at the farmer's market. I'm so excited for your sourdough journey. So stay tuned because I am gonna be teaching you how I make my sourdough loaves. It's super easy, 3 ingredients. So I am very excited. I hope you stick around.